What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Dry Spread Sports channel. Ethan here, once again with a NFL Week 4 reaction now. Before we get into it, a couple things. First of all, I apologize for not getting out my start sits video for Week 4 in advance. Couple things going into that. First of all, I get busy. I mean, I got full-time jobs, house stuff, pretty much life. It's hard for me to find time to record sometimes throughout the week. Also, at the end of the day, I think when I'm talking about my reactions and then doing start sits, a lot of that does get repetitive for a video. So I think what we're going to do is we're mainly going to prioritize our reaction videos and just make those, even if they are a little bit more lengthy, just make those a little bit more in depth. And if you guys have start sit questions, feel free to just comment on the videos and I will get back to you. But other than that, our start sit videos may kind of go onto the back burner while I'm kind of struggling to find a consistent schedule. We'll see what happens, though. There might be weeks where I have more time and I get more out. But mainly, if you have questions about your team or start sit questions or trade questions, please just comment them on my most recent video and I will see them and I will quickly get back to you. Other than that, guys, we're going to get into it. If you like the video, found it useful, helpful at all, please like it and then subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff with sports throughout the season, especially NFL right now. Let's get into Cowboys-Giants, the Thursday night game. First reaction here. Weird game. I mean, ultimately ended up being very boring. And, honestly, a really bad Thursday night games, which we know sometimes Thursday night games can end up like that. Cowboys win 20-15. Cowboys really needed this win. If they would have lost to the Giants, then you could have called their season over. They are struggling a little bit. Their offensive line looks horrible. They really didn't look that good in this game, but the Giants are just worse, and Daniel Jones is worse. I have to recall a little bit because it's been over 5 days now since the game happened, but essentially what we're looking at is it was a good matchup for the Cowboys. Rico Dowdle had some good usage. Rico Dowdle, as we projected in the offseason, has already taken over Zeke. Zeke might vulture some goal line carries. However, Rico Dowdle's the guy there. Their running game is bad, so their offensive line just isn't what it is, of pass. So you have to temper expectations with Rico Dowdle. However, he gets receiving work, and he looks pretty explosive, relatively explosive. So he's a good play for fantasy. Jake Ferguson gets some action in this game. He looks good on the Cowboys side. He's still waiting for a touchdown from him. CD catches an awesome touchdown, but then kind of disappears in the second half. Don't really know what the Cowboys are doing. I know it's hard when he's double covered all game, but I'm going to just keep saying it. He needs to see 15 targets a game. I understand getting the ball to Ferguson. I understand checking it down to Rico Dowdle. I understand trying to get Tolbert and Cook. Cook's involved a little bit, but ultimately, if you're leaving the game and CD has less than 10 targets, you're playing with fire. It makes no sense to me. So he gets 8 targets in this game, but has a great touchdown catch. So looks great. Has a couple really tough matchups going into the bye week in a couple weeks, but then after the bye week, the schedule is pretty light the rest of the season for the Cowboys as far as being able to throw the ball. So, Dak and CD should be in fairly good spots still as long as they stay healthy. Kind of mentioned Cooks and Tolbert there as far as fantasy goes, just not super exciting. Let's move on to the Giants. Daniel Jones still sucks. He's going to suck all season. Limits the upside for guys. Pretty much no one fantasy-wise is valuable for that team besides Singletary just because he's the workhorse guy. He's not a good back either, though. He's going to struggle unless the game script every now and then works out for him. Our guy Malik Neighbors looked fantastic. He did get a concussion at the end of the game, but he had tons of targets, tons of receptions, tons of yards. And then Wan'Dale Robinson also vultures a lot of targets. Both guys don't end up getting a ton of yards. Unless they break a big play, I don't think either guy's going to have a ton of yards unless they continue to get a bunch of receptions just because Daniel Jones isn't good enough. He can pretty much just throw short to intermediate passes consistently, and that's where they're going to have to live all season. However, huge for PPR fantasy leagues. So ultimately, the Giants are bad. They're probably going to finish the year easily bottom 10, if I had to guess, after week 4. And then the Cowboys also don't look very good at all because their offensive line and their defense is suspect at times. I would not be surprised if the Cowboys miss the playoffs. However, they have some pretty good matchups, like I said, through the second half of the season. So we'll see what happens with these two teams. It was a very boring, mediocre Sunday night game or Thursday night game, a lot of field goals. It was just kind of trash. Moving on, though, Saints lose to the Falcons. A couple things. First of all, I think I said it last week in my reactions. The Saints are just slightly overhyped through the first 2 weeks of the season. They're coming back down to earth now. And almost vice versa for the Falcons. They start off a little slow with their offense looking suspect. However, I think we guessed this and we talked about this a little bit. I think as the season goes on, they're just going to gel more. Kirk Cousins is going to continue to get more healthy. And they're a really good team, I think. Both of these teams are really good. I just think it goes both ways. Like the Saints, we can cool off on the Saints a little bit. They're probably going to make playoffs, but they're not going to, I don't think they're going to make, a huge splash in the league and win, 12 games or anything. They're going to be, a probably borderline playoff team fighting for position late in the season. And then for the Falcons, I think they're pretty darn good and they're going to get better throughout the year. However, they're still not amazing. Both of these teams being in the same division are going to fight all season. It's going to be a fun division to watch how it folds out late in the year. But good game, really fun game. Younghoe Koo is an awesome kicker, wins it for the Falcons. A couple things. Let's start with the Saints. Rashid Shaheed's got some targets in this game, so if he continues to get looks, he may not be that as much of a boom or bust guy. Olave comes into this game suffering a hamstring injury late in the week last week. He still plays and he looks pretty good. We're still just waiting on touchdowns from Olave, and hopefully he can stay healthy. Kamara balls out. He's a beast. Derek Carr is mediocre. He's a mediocre quarterback. He'll have some games where he's protected well and the defense he's playing is suspect and he's able to pick them apart. There's going to be some games like this where he's not going to put up a lot of fantasy value because he's playing against a good defense. As far as the Falcons go, Kirk Cousins is going to slowly get more healthy. Drake London has had more targets each week this season, so that's a high-rising guy for fantasy football if you have a Drake London. Maybe doesn't have a huge ceiling just because of the way they run the offense and they run the ball so much. However, you love to see that every single week so far through the first 4 weeks, he's had an uptick in targets every game. If he can just break that 6 reception barrier and start getting 8, 9 receptions, he's going to be an awesome fantasy football player the rest of the season. Rest of the receivers there flex plays. Mooney looks decent. I wouldn't play McLeod. And then Bijan Robinson obviously looks like Bijan Robinson. Don't think he had a huge game in this one, but he does score a touchdown. Let's see how well this box score thing is going to work for me. Does he catch a receiving touchdown? He does not. So Bijan Robinson looks like Bijan Robinson doesn't have a great game. Tyler Algier does get some looks, so it's concerning a little bit if you're a Bijan Robinson owner. However, Bijan Robinson is just so much more explosive and has guaranteed value in the passing game. So you just don't worry about him too much. Saints also have a very good defense, so wasn't a great matchup for Bijan. He's going to have some great matchups throughout the season. So let's move on here. Keep going back to the main thing here. Also, we're on ESPN with the scores today. I kind of think this looks better, and I might start doing it this way. Moving on, though. Bears beat the Rams in what was kind of a boring game, but ultimately it was close and a little bit entertaining towards the end. I think bottom line here is we don't have to say much about the Rams. They're just very injured right now, and without Kupp and Puka, their offense is very limited. Once they get back, hopefully they get back and they're actually healthy, their offense will go back to being pretty decent this year. Matthew Stafford's a baller. He made some crazy throws in this game, but just didn't have enough in the tank as an offense to get them over the hump. So Like I said, they need to get Puka and Cut back in the next couple of weeks, and they need to be back healthy and hopefully survive the rest of the season, health wise. And they should be a good offense. Kyron Williams is a beast. He continues to stay healthy and continues to get looks and touchdowns. Everyone else there is mediocre just because they're not very good. The backup receivers, you don't love them, and then the tight end situation there isn't great as far as fantasy football goes or in real life. So if you're a Rams fan or own Rams players like Puka or Cup, hang in there, and I think things will get better as long as people get back healthy. However, it's kind of ugly to watch right now and frustrating. As far as the Bears go, I mean, they're pretty much riding a very solid defense along with some good weapons on offense to survive and win some of these games. Like, Caleb Williams is struggling so much right now, but they're getting away with it because their defense is good, and then they have so many weapons offensively that it takes them over the edge. DeAndre Swift game, he breaks a very nice run and has a great fantasy football game. Not sure I'm really buying it. Maybe this clicks something when their coaching staff in with Swift, and maybe they just continue to feature him more throughout the season. However, it's just I think it's more of a one-off game, and they're still going to use Roschon Johnson at the goal line. So at the very least, it's exciting if you have DeAndre Swift. However, I wouldn't count on a lot of great DeAndre Swift games going forward. As far as the receivers go there, I mean, DJ Moore is option number one. However, after him, you don't really feel fantastic about playing a Dunze or Keenan Allen. They just take each other's ceilings away. There's going to be some games where one of them does great and the other one doesn't do anything. There'll be games where they both do okay. There's going to be games where they both do nothing. So I'm fine if you have DJ Moore. I'm most confident in him, but the other two I'm not very confident about. And then after having a huge Cole Kmet game, you get Keenan Allen back in the lineup, and he's back to being mediocre tight end. So with the Bears, keep an eye on the running back situation with Roschon and Swift and Herbert. They might end up trading Herbert to maybe the Dallas Cowboys or something. I could see that happening. I don't think he even gets a touch in this game. I'm not sure. Let's actually look at that while we're trying to make this video a little bit more in depth. He doesn't even get a rushing opportunity. I don't know if he played or what. So keep an eye on the running back situation. Swift does have a great game. He has a lot of receptions too. Yeah, he just went off this game. Maybe this is if Herbert's going to be gone, then Swift's value is way more of an interest. So it was a great matchup with the Rams, so don't expect it all the time. But I mean, it was a really good game from him. As far as receiving goes, we kind of talked about it, just very mediocre from everyone, including DJ Moore. However, I'm wanting DJ Moore. Caleb Williams is just going to struggle a lot. So we'll see what happens. Keep an eye on all of their players, mainly the running back situation. We kind of know what their receiving situation is going to look like. It's not going to be very appealing unless Caleb Williams starts to click. Let's go back here. Next game. Interesting game here. The score looks great. The end of the game was exciting. However, it was really a blowout by the Vikings. And I'm going to spend a minute on this game just giving the Vikings their credit. The Vikings were a team that I did not really have any sort of belief in going into the season. I did not think the Vikings were going to be all that good. I thought they were going to be at best mediocre. I didn't think Sam Darnold was going to be good. I didn't really recognize how good their coaching staff was. Well, they proved us all wrong through 4 weeks. Their coaching staff is elite. Sam Darnold is talented, and the players around them are fantastic, especially their defense. Their defense is very good and I think legit, although they started to give up some points later in this game. I think they kind of let off the gas a little bit. Huge game by the Vikings and huge win by the Vikings to go into Lambeau and win here. I'm going to keep talking about the Vikings, then I'll make some excuses for the Packers here in a second. I mean, the Vikings, like I say, they're just legit. Justin Jefferson's awesome. Addison has a great game. Darnold continues to have a great game in what should have been kind of a tough matchup on the road. For the Vikings, Aaron Jones is looking legit. It was kind of a revenge game for Aaron Jones, so that probably played a little bit into what happened with Aaron Jones, but he was great. Just an all-around great performance, and then they're going to get TJ Hawkinson back probably within the next few weeks, which will make them even better. Shout out to Vikings. Shout out to Vikings fans. Very good team. I think they're going to be They're on their way to having a top seed in the NFC for the playoffs. As far as later in the season, it's still very early. They have to keep proving it, but man, they just look solid all around. So very, very fun if you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, and shout out them. Don't have really much else to say about them. You could talk all day about how good they are and how excited you should be, but they're just solid. That's the word I have for them through 4 weeks. Packers, I mean, the excuse for the Packers is that it's Jordan Love's first week back from an injury, and it probably just took him some time to kind of get into the game again, and that's why they started off so slow. Couple things. Watson has a high ankle sprain. They're saying mild high ankle sprain. However, I thought all ankle sprains were usually like at least a 4-week injury. I wouldn't be surprised if he's out like 3 to 4 weeks at least. It looked pretty gnarly. But avoid a major injury. However, Christian Watson is becoming like the fourth option on the team anyway. So like, sorry if you have Christian Watson on your fantasy team. I'm about to like drop him in one of my leagues. So he's a decent player to have in real life. Pretty worthless in fantasy, even with Jordan Love. I really like Jayden Reed with Jordan Love back. I really like Dobbs with Jordan Love back and Watson out. And I really, really like Wicks with Jordan Love back and Watson out. Wicks had the massive like breakout game this week. He's been so consistent through the first 4 weeks as a receiver. I think with Watson out, he's going to see a lot of targets. He had a lot of targets in this game and 2 touchdowns. You could maybe say they were almost like garbage time touchdowns. However, the Vikings defense is good, so the fact that he's making plays is pretty cool. Keep an eye on how the receivers and the targets look the next couple of weeks. We'll see if Wicks emerges or Dobbs emerges or if they just like kind of split. Jayden Reed's set up to have some big games coming up, though. As far as the backfield goes, I mean, Jacobs is so frustrating, man. He's had like 4 touches this season already, averaging like 1 in each game that I remember seeing. That like he like just should be scoring a touchdown, and he just doesn't. Whether the line just doesn't block, or he gets tripped up, or he just looks unathletic and doesn't like push his way over the goal line. Like something happens and he's unable to score touchdowns, and it's killing me as a fantasy manager and someone that has him on my fantasy team. Also, on top of that, I don't even remember. I'm going to have to go in the box score here and look at his name, but the backup running back is taking some looks too, Emmanuel Wilson. I mean, you see in this game, the game script was horrible. That's why the carries look so low. But Emmanuel Wilson has as much carries as Josh Jacobs does. Josh Jacobs has way more efficiency, so I don't know why they keep giving Emmanuel Wilson so many touches, but like it's so concerning. Luckily, Josh Jacobs gets 4 receptions out of the backfield, so that's nice, and Emmanuel Wilson is on the sideline most of those, but it's really frustrating. You need Jacobs to getting into the end zone, and hopefully with Jordan Love back, their running game starts to like kind of be more consistent, and there's more opportunities for him to get in the red zone. Because looking at their schedule, it's not like the running defenses they're going to face throughout the year are going to be like getting very much easier. They need to find some sort of consistency, because the 10 PPR points a game for Jacobs is not enough for where most of us had to draft him. So overall, great game. One more thing on the Packers, I think Kraft is emerging as like the must-have tight end if you want the tight ends there. I still don't, but one last little piece for them on that. Packers are still in a great position. Shout out them for like fighting and coming back and making it a game. Still kind of a rough loss at home. They'll be fine though. Jordan Love just coming back off of his injury kind of hurt them. Maybe a little bit of a surprising game, but not really. Pittsburgh barely loses to the Colts. Start off with Pittsburgh. I mean, this was just one of those. This was bound to happen. Their offense just isn't good. They played like a Colts defense here that is finding their own. However, just still not like an amazing defense, and they still just prove to be a mediocre offense. It's going to hurt them, Like if they're going to make the playoffs like they always do, and their defense is good enough to where like they're going to continue to win games, but there's going to be plenty of games, including in the playoffs, where they're going to end up losing these games because their offense just isn't good enough and doesn't have enough juice. And that's kind of what we saw in this one. Fantasy-wise, I mean, Justin Fields has a fantastic game. He runs the ball a lot in this one, scores some rushing touchdowns. That's what you hate to see if you have Najee Harris on your team, and even more if you have Jalen Warren. I mean, Jalen Warren's borderline like he's like a handcuff to just if Najee Harris ever gets hurt. Najee Harris is like a tough play always because he's capped because of Jalen Hurts' rushing ability. Not Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields' rushing ability. And it's just kind of gross there. Pat Freiermuth gets some targets, but once again, the offense itself isn't very good, and it's just not a lot of upside. George Pickens has a decent game. He does have a horrific fumble, though, but George Pickens is really the only guy I really would care to own in fantasy-wise for the Steelers. He's a great player, great receiver, a guy that they're forced to give targets to every game. Once again, though, the offense as a whole is just not good enough to have like any sort of consistent efficiency or any sort of consistent ceiling kind of a deal. This is just going to happen to the Steelers. They're going to be in a lot of games because of their defense. They're going to win a lot of games because of the defense, but they're going to end up losing games because the offense just isn't very good. And then on the Colts side, very interesting. We all kind of, or at least I could have assumed, like we all kind of thought that Anthony Richardson wasn't going to be all that good this year. Not only is he proven to be a really bad passer, but like he's going to continue to get hurt if they keep using him in the way they are, where he's like running and taking shots all the time. And that's what happens against a crazy physical and good defense. Your quarterback's going to get hurt if you keep doing that. And that's what happened. Anthony Richardson starts off the game pretty well, but then he ends up getting hurt. Joe Flacco comes in. He's a solid quarterback, kind of like a Derek Carr kind of guy, gets the receivers going, and they end up pulling off the win. They looked good with Joe Flacco in there. It does sound like Richardson's completely fine and going to come back in there. If Richardson's playing, I'm not a huge fan of any of the receivers. I mean, Pittman started off the game well with Richardson, but it's just going to be inconsistent. As going forward, at least. It could change halfway through the season and we could start seeing more stuff, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be very good. So, not Saquon. I always get Saquon and Jonathan Taylor mixed up. Jonathan Taylor has a great game as well, especially without Anthony Richardson playing most of the game. However, he gets hurt, and I think he also has a high ankle sprain, so I'd be shocked to see him the next 2 or 3 weeks. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Look for their backup running backs in fantasy. I think it might be Trey Sermon, but I don't even know. Let's look at this, actually, while we're here. Who got the carries after he went out? Trey Sermon. Yeah, Trey Sermon's their backup, so he's not a good quarterback or running back, but if Jonathan Taylor's going to miss a few weeks, I mean, you need to pick him up and probably start him looking into week 5. Good win for the Colts, though. All right. My Broncos, we'll definitely spend a minute on this just because it's my Broncos, but maybe the most boring game of the season. Horrible weather game. A little bit of a shocker. I mean, as a Broncos fan, I'm a little shocked that they went in there and won with a rookie quarterback, but we'll start with the Broncos. I mean, I think as a Broncos fan, we know who they are as of right now. They're a horrible offense with a struggling rookie quarterback. And to be honest, I think Bo Nix is a quarterback that I have a hard time picturing ever like winning a Super Bowl, if that makes sense. I know you're like, why are you talking about Super Bowl right now? Like, I just don't think he's got like it. Maybe he'll end up being like a decent quarterback, and there's a possibility that like in a perfect situation he could be an amazing like a Super Bowl winning quarterback. However, I'm just looking at a season in total. Like, I don't think his ceiling's ever going to be like an Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes. His ceiling's maybe going to be like a Derek Carr, which hurts to say and hurts to think about as a Broncos fan, but like I truly think that's kind of how he is. He's working his way up to being like a Derek Carr for Sean Payton. And, I mean, especially with the lack of weapons and stuff that the Broncos have on offense, their offense is going to continue to struggle for most of the season, I believe, especially when they're playing good defenses. They're not going to look good pretty much whatsoever. Bo Nix has 60 passing yards in this game and had negative passing yards at half. Horrific. How often do you hear that? It's so disgusting, miserable. I can't even watch these games. I literally just leave Red Zone on. I can't even bear to watch them. I'm excited when they win, of course. I'm excited when they look good and make some good plays, but it's just so few and far in between, and there's so much ugliness to go along with it, it's hard to watch. So, shout out to Cortland Sutton, pretty much the only player on the team that had a positive passing yard, which is weird to say. He continues to be like the alpha in the offense as far as receiving goes. Still hard to play him because of how bad Bo Nix is and how bad the offense is in general. Running back wise, we talked about Bidet. We did figure out his name is Bidet, the running back for the Broncos. He was about to be featured in this game, but then quickly got injured, and he had to get like carted off and everything. It looked like a scary situation. However, it seems like he's thankfully okay. After that happens, though, Javonte Williams decides to prove everyone wrong and shut everyone up and show that he still has some juice. He looked really good against a tough defense in the second half. So maybe Javonte Williams, if you have him and you've just been like crying about how bad he's been and having to just keep him on the bottom of your bench, maybe you actually do have some potential there going forward, and especially when some good matchups. So maybe that'll end up. We'll have to keep an eye on how Javonte Williams and Julian McLaughlin continue to look. So not exciting because the offense is so bad, but maybe like a flex play now. Before it was nothing. So we'll take it. Overall, just shout out to Broncos defense, even after missing their most valuable part of the defense besides Pat Surtain. With Alex Singleton missing the year with the ACL, they looked pretty good still. They looked very good still. The D-line is legit, and the secondary is legit. Starring Pat Surtain. He is incredible. Shuts down Garrett Wilson in this game. So, shout out Broncos defense. Moving on to the Jets. Kind of similar. Like, they have a great defense, but it is a little embarrassing that they let the Broncos come in with a rookie quarterback coming into their house on the second road game in a row for the Broncos. They haven't even been. They didn't even go back to Denver, and they give up a win or lose in that kind of fashion at home. The weather was horrific, so that absolutely played a factor for both teams. But my goodness, if you're a Jets fan, that is horrible loss. Jets offense was just shut down by the defense, even with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, there's a couple spark plays, but none of them were to Garrett Wilson, really. I think Garrett Wilson had one big catch, I guess. But other than that, the running game was completely shut down. Both running backs did nothing. Aaron Rodgers looked as bad as Bo Nix most of the game, and it was just bad. Going forward, they'll have better matchups. The weather will be better. And so, like, Garrett Wilson's a play, Breece Hall is still a play, but, man, it was an ugly, ugly game for the Jets. Planning on them to bounce back, but we'll see what the matchups are. I mean, they're also not looking like they're a very good team as of right now. Moving on to the Eagles-Buccaneers. The Eagles were just down bad. I mean, they didn't have Devontae Smith, they didn't have A.J. Brown. Their top two weapons on offense were out, and it was pretty much just they had nothing in the first half at all. And then the Buccaneers came out as like a revenge kind of game because of how they looked last week against the Broncos and just tore up the Eagles. So on one side, you have a banged-up Eagles offense that couldn't move the ball hardly at all until Saquon Barkley started to get going, and that's kind of the story of the Eagles. I mean, they just didn't have their weapons. When they have their weapons, they'll be fine. And then on the other side of the ball, the Buccaneers, they were angry coming off a bad loss. They needed to bounce back, and Baker Mayfield looked crazy good. And the Eagles' defense just isn't that good, and so they let Baker Mayfield be very good. Still keeping an eye on the Buccaneers running backs. Looks like Bucky Irvin's just going to slowly eat into Rachaad White's workload and maybe eventually take over. Until then, they're going to be splitting 50-50, and it's going to be a little bit annoying. Mike Evans goes off this game. Chris Godwin's great. They even get some other guys involved, including the tight end, but ultimately they just dominated, and they look like a good team. Buccaneers, their one loss to the Broncos is a horrific loss after beating the Eagles easily, and then they went into the Lions Stadium and beat the Lions, and it's like not really sure what to make about the Buccaneers. I think they're overall a good team. So if you're the Eagles, you don't hate the loss too badly because you know your offense is banged up and you're playing against a good team. However, you know your defense is a little suspect and it still doesn't feel great. And then if you're a Buccaneers fan, you kind of just like have to wipe off the loss to the Broncos and just hope that your team can continue to show more consistency consistency, and then come playoff time, hopefully you guys are in a good spot. But Buccaneers looking pretty good. All right, finally, the Bengals get a win, and they beat the terrible Panthers. I mean, the Panthers, even with a better Andy Dalton at quarterback, they're going to not be a good team still. So, looking at this game, the Bengals prove that their defense is suspect. However, that their offense, now that it's been 4 weeks, is back on track. So it takes them about 4 weeks. Now we know the Bengals do this every year now. It's going to take them 3 to 4, maybe 5 weeks to get back on track, but they're a great offense. So with Joe Burrow healthy and Higgins healthy and Chase healthy, they're going to be great, and that's what they did in this game. All those guys are startable in fantasy, and then they have some like role players to fill in around them. Chase Brown steals the touchdowns for the most part in this game and has a fantastic game. Although Zach Moss, I'm pretty sure, also ends up scoring a touchdown. I think it was a receiving touchdown. Yeah, they both get 15 carries. Yeah, Zach Moss has 4 catches. So, like, maybe Chase Brown emergence. They split the carries and they both get some passing game work. But I think it was just a great game script and against a terrible team, and it just worked out. I would expect Chase Brown to come down to earth a little bit. However, the Bengals have a good offense when they're clicking. So, overall, you like what you see from the offense if you're a Bengals fan. Panthers, I mean, they're just a bad team. They're going to run into a lot of losses this year, and this was one of them. Hungry Bengals team needed a win, and they took advantage of not a very good Panthers team. Andy Dalton is going to keep the team competent, I guess. They're not good enough at all. Deontay Johnson's going to benefit from Andy Dalton greatly. He's a great play in fantasy. Leggett gets into the end zone and get this game. Not a guy I love in fantasy, but he's useful. While Thielen's out, keep an eye on how long Thielen's out. Chuba Hubbard has a good game, but we're waiting for the big dog and Jonathan Brooks still. So, Panthers fans, sorry. I mean, you had a great win last week, but you guys are still not very good. They'll run into a couple wins this year. However, moving on. I just don't have a lot to say about some of these games. I mean, we all kind of we just know what they are a little bit. So if I go fast on a game and you have more questions about your team or something, just comment, guys, and I'll love to chat with you more in the comments. Moving on, though, to the Jaguars and Texans. Jaguars are the only 0-4 team this year, the only winless team. They're horrible, guys. There's always a possibility they figure it out and something starts to click, but I don't think so. I think they're just bad. Trevor Lawrence isn't that good, and the rest of the team is very mediocre. Still waiting for an Ingram return. Maybe that helps somehow. But, boy, they just look really, really not good. This wasn't a great matchup. The Texans are good, and they played a lot better than they did against the Bills last week. But, 0-4, you're pretty much out of the race already. And it's been not even a month. And they're already out of the playoffs, essentially. Like, statistically, they are. Don't feel great still about Etienne and Bigsby. While we're talking about them, let's look at the carries. Yeah, they split carries, guys, and Bigsby, I think, is more explosive. So, continue to watch that. Keep an eye on that. This game, if you have Brian Thomas, you feel fantastic, and Christian Kirk has a good game. When Ingram finally comes back, though, I'm not very excited about Christian Kirk, so just keep that in mind. They're just not a good team all around. Maybe they start to run into some wins eventually, but it's a sad season for Jaguars fans. After, I believe the owner or the GM or someone came out and said that this is the best Jaguars team they've ever put together, and now Doug Peterson has your team at 0-4. Don't even know if I just blame Doug Peterson. I just think it's not that good of a team. Moving on to the Texans, not a very spicy win. I mean, they barely beat a bad Jaguars team. However, at the end of the day, it's a division game. And those games can go either way. So, good win for the Texans, I guess. We're looking at Stephon Diggs still playing a huge role. If he's healthy, I guess they're just going to continue to force feed him targets, and he's going to get work. No Tank Dell in this game, so that probably had an effect on it. It wasn't Nico Collins' go-off game. So, shout out Nico Collins. He's a great player. Cam Akers continues to get the majority of the work without Mixon. I think Mixon's coming back this coming week, so that'll change. Cam Akers will be pretty much useless after Mixon's back. They'll feature Mixon again. Texans are 3-1. They do look good. They are suspect. They have holes in their team. However, they're still a great team. They're solid all around, solid defense, solid running game, solid weapons on offense, good quarterback. So they'll probably end up being in the playoffs this year, and they look like a solid team. Let's go back to the next one here. Maybe one of the shockers of the week. Like I gave the Vikings shout-outs, I think I need to give the Commanders their shout-out here. The coaching staff is doing an incredible job. Jane Daniels was the best quarterback in the draft class, and he's proving it. He looks fantastic. He looks so much like Lamar Jackson and RG3. It's crazy. The defense, while the defense is horrible, I think Dan Quinn, sorry if I said Dan Campbell a second ago. I don't remember what I even said, but I maybe didn't even say anything, and I'm just like I was just thinking it. But Dan Quinn is a defensive coach, so there's going to be some improvement throughout the year and throughout the next couple seasons with that Commanders defense, and they're going to turn into a team real quick with how good their quarterback is. Their running game is phenomenal. They're putting Jaden Daniels in a very ideal position with, short yardage situations and the running game being so solid with Brian Robinson Jr. Eckler should be coming back this next week. All around, Jaden Daniels just looks super efficient. He's accurate. Shout out to the Washington Commanders. Huge win, being 3-0. Great win. Great team. And they kind of embarrassed the Cardinals here. Cliff Kingsbury game, Cliff Kingsbury, the OC for the Commanders, shout out him. He had a revenge game here, and he took advantage of it. My goodness. I will say, fantasy-wise, for the Commanders, Jane Daniels is a beast with his legs, so he's a beast in fantasy. Terry McLaurin's the number one there, and pretty much the only viable wide receiver. You just hope that the connection will grow throughout the season, and Jane Daniels' passing game will be a little bit more consistent. The running game is it, though. Brian Robinson Jr. is a very good running back. Nichols in this game just vultures two touchdowns. Robinson should have had a 40-point fantasy week, but the other running back who no one even knew was on the team ends up getting a bunch of fantasy points, which just goes to show how good the running game is. And then Eckler is going to be coming back. So incredible performance, incredible team. All around pretty good for fantasy right now. You don't love the tight end situation. You don't love the receiver situation, but they're a good offense and they're putting up points. So it's pretty nice. Cardinals look kind of like how the Cardinals have looked the past several years. They have an offense. They have potential. But they're going to have these games where they just look horrible and nothing clicks. And I think that's kind of like Kyler Murray. Not a great game for them. Of course, Marvin Harrison Jr. gets in the end zone, but they kind of stop featuring him, and they just get shut down. James Conner does have a good game as well, but my goodness, they just got boat raced, essentially, and their defense is horrible. Might be even worse than the Commanders' defense, but fantasy-wise, it's pretty obvious. Trey McBride was out, but you play him when he's healthy. Marvin Harrison Jr. is obviously play. Kyler Murray's a play most of the time, especially when the good matchups. Unfortunately, didn't do very good in this one, but James Conner's an obvious play. So, Cardinals probably bottom 10 team this year, if I had to guess. Maybe they start clicking later in the season with their offense, but their defense is just bad, I think, and it's going to lose them a lot of games. Shout out to the Commanders, though, one more time. Shout out Commanders. All right. Horrible game here. Patriots get destroyed by the 49ers. 49ers needed this game, man. They're still a little banged up, but they had Kittle and Debo back, and they went off on a terrible Patriots team. Quickly on the Patriots, they're terrible. I'm not even going to say bottom 10. Patriots are bottom 5, maybe bottom 3. Probably bottom 3. They're just horrible. Their offense is disgusting. They're probably going to end up making a change halfway through the year with Drake May replacing Jacoby Brissett. It's why not? Their offense is just so bad. They might as well just let the rookie get some reps. The running game is gone now all of a sudden. Rashad Stevenson's terrible. He fumbles all the time. I think Ramondre Stevenson. I don't think Ramondre Stevenson's a horrible back. The problem is his fumbling right now. And he's losing games for his teams almost. And he's fumbling so often, and he might get replaced if he keeps doing it. So he's not playable if he's going to fumble all the time. No one offensively is really viable fantasy-wise. You like Jalen Polk still, but he's just not good enough with Jacoby Brissett. Their team is bad. Their offensive line's bad. It's just a mess. And it's going to continue to be a mess for the most part, especially in tough matchups with, for an example, 49ers. 49ers look more like themselves in this game. However, they have a very easy matchup. The Patriots are bad. So Brock Purdy's a good player. Going to be a little bit inconsistent at times. However, if he's got Debo, Ayuk, and Kittle in there, they're going to be a good team. So all of those guys are startable in fantasy. Jordan Mason, startable in fantasy. Keep an eye on when Christian ends up coming back this season. However, they're a great team, great offense when they got health on their side and they're all playing. Great team. Easy win for them. I think 2-2 49ers. I mean, they lost to the Vikings and was it the Packers? I forget their other loss. Might have been a bad loss. I forgot. But they're a good team. They're going to be in the playoffs this year without a doubt. Moving on. Browns, Raiders. Horrible game against two horrible teams. Talked a lot last week about how bad the Raiders are after their loss to the Panthers. And then, of course, they go ahead and bounce back. However, I think this just says more about how bad the Browns are. Browns are horrible. Deshaun Watson's not good. I think they're maybe going to end up trading Amari Cooper at some point during the season. Or, like we're going to talk about in a second with the Raiders, Amari Cooper's going to pull a Devontae Adams and quit on the team and request a trade. But I don't know. They just look horrible. I don't really like any of their players. I mean, I want Amari Cooper in fantasy, but he is so limited by Deshaun Watson's lack of ability, to put it bluntly. That offense is so hindered with Deshaun Watson and how bad he's been. Wait for Nick Chubb to get back. That offense could change a little bit with that explosiveness. Don't really think Nick Chubb's going to change all that much, though, because I think the injuries coming back from will likely see a little bit of a different Nick Chubb when he comes back. But something to look forward to, at least if you're a Browns fan. Don't like the rest of the team at all. It's just bad, and it was a good matchup with what isn't that good of a Raiders defense at all. So, and they had a bunch of players out in this game too. The Raiders did on defense, and they still lose and offense. Horrible loss for the Browns. They're not a good team. They're bottom 10. Raiders, good win for them. I mean, good bounce back win. They're still not good. I'm not buying it at all. I mean, the Browns are just so bad. Nothing of note, really, besides Zamir White continues to just show inability and how bad he is as a running back. Madison takes the touchdown, which is annoying if you have Zamir White, but Madison's proving more than Zamir White does. I mean, Zamir White has a disgusting fumble in this game that keeps the Browns in the game, and they return it for a touchdown. I'd play Madison over Zamir White after what we've seen through 4 weeks if I'm a coach there. But disgusting for fantasy. Brock Bowers has a pretty mediocre game. I think Brock Bowers had a horrible drop too. Let's look at the box score real quick. Bad to see for Brock Bowers, but we can kind of chalk it up to he's a rookie. He's going to have a couple bad games. Yeah, he does literally nothing. Maybe the game plan was to stop him. Unfortunate if you have Brock Bowers, but he's still a great player overall at the end of the day. Let's talk about what we all predicted, though. Devontae Adams has quit on the team after 4 weeks. We hear today that he was requested a trade. Everybody who has any common sense about his situation in sports in general could have predicted that he was going to quit on the team at some point this year. Bottom line, the Raiders aren't a good team, and Adams, being who he was gonna pull this at some point. I mean, if he's not on a winning team, he's going to be a little. I don't want to cuss, but he's going to be a little baby. So we'll see what happens with that situation. It makes the Raiders a lot worse now. Now that Adams is probably not going to play until he gets traded, or he's going to end up getting traded most likely. You look at a guy like Jacoby Myers, and he's very viable in fantasy now. But Even Trey Tucker's looking a little better. But you just don't – I'm not confident in the team enough to, like, really be super excited about those players. What's going to be really interesting to see where Davante Adams gets traded, because there's some trade spots out there where if he lands on certain teams, he could be amazing, and it could be like a league-winning situation and just shock like the NFL in general, or he could just go somewhere mid. So if I'm the Raiders, I mean, I'm not wanting to trade him to like the Chiefs who just lost Rashee Rice or like anything like that, but like you never know. You never know what they're going to get from what team, so keep an eye on what happens there. Let's move on here. Speaking of Rashee Rice, oh my goodness, guys. I'm going to rant here for a second, but like try not to get too caught up in what actually happened in the game. I'm going to very quickly give the Chiefs their props. Andy Reid is a Hall of Fame coach. He's amazing. Patrick Mahomes is a good player. They just win games. They find ways to win games. They get help from the refs often. However, like I'm mostly joking when I say that, sort of. Like, they win all the time, no matter what the game is, no matter what the script is. They find a way somehow, and I think that's just because Andy Reid's so good and the coaching staff is so good. Patrick Mahomes is so good. Like, they're going to find a way to win. This is a game they should have lost, but they find a way to win. Now I'm going to just trash the Chiefs for a second. The Chiefs aren't that good this year. They've come off of 2 Super Bowl wins. They're trying to three-peat. Their team is, like, struggling because of, like, the fact that they've been so good the past couple years, if that makes sense. Like, they've had to pay guys. They've had to lose some guys. They have injuries right now. Like, they're not very good, but they continue to win, obviously. They have no running game or no like high octane or, like it's not a solid running game. It's just like there. It's not horrible, but they're playing Kareem Hunt. Like, Kareem Hunt wasn't playing on a football team through the first 3 weeks, and now like Kareem Hunt's their lead back. By the way, Kareem Hunt looked great in this game. I would love to pick him up in all my leagues if I wasn't on the bottom 5 of the waiver wire orders. Kareem Hunt is a viable option, no doubt. The big one here, though, they no longer have any solidified weapons on offense besides, of course, Kelce and then Mahomes at quarterback, because Mahomes throws his 4th or 5th horrific interception of the season in the first drive or 2 of the game, proceeds to go to throw his body towards the direction of the player as he's getting tackled, and completely brutalizes his best wide receiver's knee to the point where at this point, everyone's assuming that he tore Rashee Rice's ACL and he's out for season. First of all, RIP Rashee Rice and everyone that has Rashee Rice on their fantasy teams, including myself, who was looking like they were in a fantastic position through the first few weeks of the season with Rashee Rice, and all of a sudden that's all over. We don't know for certain at the making of this video here, of this reaction. We don't know for certain because they're doing additional testing and stuff. However, I'd be absolutely shocked if Rashee Rice does not miss at least 6 to 8 weeks, which is essentially the rest of the season. That's like best case scenario is if he misses like 6 weeks and then comes back. It looked like a blatant torn ACL. I don't know why they're taking so long to like reveal that to everybody. It looked like it was a blatant torn ACL, courtesy of Patrick Mahomes not knowing what he's doing. So now their offense is just so limited. Now, obviously, Travis Kelce is going to get more involved. Xavier Worthy is going to probably start to emerge as the season goes on a lot more. They're going to get some mediocre guys like Justin Watson targets and whoever else they have there. P. Ryan out of the backfield will steal a lot of check downs. Sky Moore will get in there. Juju Smith-Schuster. All these guys are just so mid that I don't know how we can see the Chiefs winning another Super Bowl. Now, they're the Chiefs. Not only do they have the referees' help, they're going to find a way, like we've been saying. They're a good team. They're going to get to the playoffs easily. They'll probably win another playoff game or 2. I don't see them winning the Super Bowl again this year. I would love for me to be able to talk about my team this way and say, oh, they're not going to win the Super Bowl again this year. Like, oh, sorry, Chiefs fans. Sorry I have to talk about your team like this. But, like, I'd be shocked after the injuries they've had and stuff. They're going to end up dropping some games here. They might lose Monday night this next week to the Saints. I would not be surprised at all. They're just not explosive anymore. Even Travis Kelce just looks like a lot slower. Now, the thing that they have going for them is they just find ways to win games, no matter what. So they're going to be easily in the playoffs, no doubts about it. If you're a Chiefs fan watching this and you get to this point in the video and you're like rolling your eyes because you hate everything I'm saying, like calm down. You're going to be fine. Don't get triggered. I just don't – I have a hard time seeing them winning another Super Bowl with the lack of talent on offense. No, I already see, hey, we did it a couple years ago. Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid figured it out. Yeah, possibly, but it's going to be tough, man. I mean, they lost their best weapon by far, Rashee Rice. Kelce looks like he's getting old. He's getting slower. We'll see. They'll be fine for the season, but it's ugly, and then it's ugly for fantasy. I mean, Patrick Mahomes for fantasy has been not only has he taken out my best receiver for fantasy, but now he's just like destroying the rest of the leagues that I have him as my quarterback because he's just not good at fantasy anymore. He throws stupid interceptions, and then he has no weapons, so they can't move the ball down the field efficiently like they have in the past. He is a bad quarterback in fantasy right now, and hopefully it turns around for me and for people that have him in fantasy, but he looks horrible fantasy-wise. He can't do anything. He's very limited with his options, so that it makes sense, especially now. I see no daylight for him. It's ugly. It's ugly for fantasy. Like I said, pick up Kareem Hunt. He looks like all of a sudden Kareem Hunt's going to be back in the lead back for them. Don't really know anything else about the receiving core there for fantasy besides Kelce looks good and maybe Worthy starts to emerge more. But there's my Chiefs rant. My gosh, I'm not over the Rashee Rice thing. Like that just destroyed my fantasy hopes. Like I'm gonna do everything I can to work around it, but it hurts so bad. I'm not over it. Just a stupid play, stupid interception, and then what is he doing trying to throw his body like that? Like just get out of the way, Mahomes. Jeez. The only way he can make up for it in my eyes is if he starts to ball out for me in fantasy, and that means like 20, 25 points a game. He needs to figure it out. The offense is just not nearly as good as it used to be, and it's frustrating as a watcher of the game. Moving on to the Chargers, though. I mean, of course they lose just because they are the Chargers and they're playing the Chiefs. Of course they're going to lose. They're also banged up. Would have loved to see the Chargers win. However, they're just not there yet. They're going to be there next year. Jim Harbaugh's doing a lot of good stuff. They just aren't there yet. They were missing some key players. Ladd McConkey, he does look great in this game. Justin Herbert seemingly got through the game without having a huge injury. But other than that, Chiefs defense is good, annoyingly good. So Chargers had a hard time. And that's what's going to happen in some of these games. Once they get their players back, they're going to start to turn it up a little bit more again. But it was a very tough matchup for them. Dobbins is the workhorse, had a horrible game, though. Chiefs defense just shuts down running games and makes you throw. That's what they do. All right, moving on. Spent a lot of time on that game. Blowout game here by two good teams. I mean, this ultimately, Bills lose to the Ravens by a lot. This ultimately was just the Bills being comfortable with a 3-0 record and then the Ravens absolutely needing a win at home with a 1-2 record. It makes sense to me. Don't overreact to anything. Josh Allen got shut down. He's totally fine fantasy-wise. They're going to be fine going throughout the season. Every now and then, teams just drop games, like we saw with the Buccaneers losing to the Broncos. And not saying the Ravens are like the Broncos. The Ravens are very good, but the Bills, I mean, every team's going to lose eventually. That's why I'm talking about Kansas City. They're going to lose eventually, and they're going to lose some games. It's not going to just be one. So the Bills have their game on the road where they just look horrible. See a highlight down there on the screen. Derrick Henry runs all over them. The Bills' defense is suspect. I think what we could take away from it a little bit, their defense is suspect. They just have a lot of pieces that they've lost throughout the last offseason or two, and then they have some injuries. Their defense isn't very good. They're going to be in a lot of games where it's high scoring. And that's good for their offense for fantasy. Josh Allen, don't worry about him. Kincaid has a good game in this one. Don't worry about Kincaid. He's great. Cook has a mediocre game. Don't worry about Cook. They'll continue to feature him. Keep an eye on the receiving, like who emerges receiving between Shakir and Coleman. Coleman has a good game in this one. Shakir has a decent game in this one. Let's look at the box score really quick. I'm going to go pretty quick on the Ravens. Yeah, Shakir and Coleman. No, they don't really, actually. I mean, Shakir still is leading the targets or the receptions. Very interesting. Coleman has a couple good catches. However, Shakir still seems like he's the one by a little bit. So we'll continue to keep an eye on how the receiving core works out there. The Ravens, though, they bounced back, like I said. Derrick Henry
give it to Henry, right side, big hole.
Lamar Jackson looks pretty good. Has a dumb fumble, but he looks pretty good. Sorry for the volume. I don't really know what else to say about the Ravens. I mean, they're just really good, man. I mean, they had a tough start to the season, but they're going to turn it around. They have a running game. They have coaching. They have a quarterback. They have a solid defense. They're going to be just fine. They had some really tough matchups. Of course, they lose to the Chiefs week 1 because of the refs and unlucky toe out of bounds. You know, like they've had a very tough start schedule-wise to the season. Now that they got back to 2-2, they'll start playing some easier opponents. They're going to just start snowballing with some wins. So, shout out Ravens. They're back. They're great. Great for fantasy as well all around. Oh, not all around. Likely and Andrews debate. Andrews does absolutely nothing this game. Likely shows a couple catches. You pretty much just don't want to have anything to do with the Ravens tight end group. Otherwise, everyone else is pretty good. Justice Hill has a great game. That's a guy I'm keeping an eye on, especially if something happens to Derrick Henry. Monday night game here, Titans beat the Dolphins with ease. This comes down to the Dolphins are nothing without a quarterback, and even with Tua, they're just not a very good team. They're not as good as we thought they were going to be coming into this season. They have a lot of holes. Their defense isn't very good. They have some injuries on defense now. Even like when we saw week 1 and 2, like even with Tua, they struggled a little bit. Oh, Mike McDaniels needs to be careful here because he's looking not very good. He has a lot of built-in excuses because Tua's out. I think especially as far as fantasy goes, when Tua's back, the team's going to be better. But man, I mean, when Tua's back, if they continue to struggle as much as they have been, be careful because that is a bad look. Bad look. I'm going to turn this down. I'm not going to turn it down just in case it messes something up. But bad look for the Dolphins. Now they have an excuse because Tua's out. But we're going to just need if they all of a sudden become like a 2-6 team, like that's an ugly season. So we'll see what they look like when Tua's back. But start Tyreek and Waddle and Achane when Tua's back. But it's ugly right now. Titans needed this win. 0-3 team coming into this, playing a team that is pretty much incompetent without their quarterback. They ultimately just like kept pushing and kept just like doing enough, protecting the football, doing enough to slowly rack up those points, and then their running game's good enough to like slowly wear out a team that has no offense. So Titans are still a bad team, definitely bottom 10, maybe bottom like 7. They just ran into a win here is what happened. Keep an eye for the Titans on as far as their Titans go. Keep an eye on the quarterback because Will Levis was a little banged up in this game. Not that it makes that big of a difference. Their backup is just as good, essentially. And then their running game, Tajay Spears and Pollard both have good games. If they have good matchups, those guys are both very viable in fantasy. And then I want to look very quickly at the receiving. Hopkins leads in targets. Ridley does absolutely nothing. So not a great look for the receiving group. I don't really like any of the receivers for the Titans. Probably the most fun game of the week. Maybe at least top 2 or 3. Offensive explosion here. The final game of week 4 with the Lions and the Seahawks. Almost feel like I don't have to say a lot here because it was just like everyone is good, and you start all of their players in fantasy, and it looks good. But we'll break it down a little bit here. Seahawks got exposed defensively. I think that's maybe something we can keep an eye on moving forward. The Seahawks defense, I just don't think is as good as it's been through the first 3 weeks. And I think it has to do with the matchups they've had. The Seahawks, they've just had a cupcake schedule through the first 3 weeks. That's why they were 3-0. Their defense is exposable, I think, is what we learned from this. Offensively, Kenneth Walker goes off. If Kenneth Walker's playing, Zach Charbonnet is a must sit. And Kenneth Walker is obviously the RB1 there. Great game on very few touches, very efficient. The receiving game, they threw so many times in this game that everyone kind of had a decent game. However, it's really interesting because obviously DK's the one, you play him every week, but we're still wanting the emergence of JSN, which we're getting in spurts. However, I don't think it's sustainable whatsoever. JSN's a fantastic player. They use him in the slot here. He needs to continue to have targets. However, I don't think he's going to continue to have targets in certain game scripts. If they're going to just be destroying some teams, he's not going to get hardly any targets. Like we saw against the Broncos. He got like 2 targets in week 1. If they have to throw a lot like they did in this game, he's going to see 10-plus targets sometimes, and he's going to have great games. But, man, you want to see him get in the end zone if you have JSN in fantasy, and Tyler Lockett is so dang annoying, it's not even funny. Obviously, Tyler Lockett's the third guy here. He just is good enough to where he still gets targets and makes plays, and that's why Geno Smith continues to look at him, but he's so annoying. Just Tyler Lockett, can you just get out of the offense so all of us JSN people can have a good time? Even in this game, you see Jake Bobo getting on the action. The tight ends getting in on the action. Laviska Shenault has a play in this game. It was just like there was so much opportunity for JSN and DK to just go have monster games, but they just ended up Geno Smith just like spread the ball to all these like dudes that no one wants to care about in fantasy at all. And it was so frustrating. It's frustrating because you know it's going to continue to happen probably without an injury to anyone. And it's just like scary because there's going to be games where JSN's going to get 10, 15 targets and have 20-plus fantasy points. And then there's going to be games where he gets 2 targets and has 0. So frustrating. So keep an eye on the receiving situation there in Seattle. It was a great matchup for those receivers in this game. The Lions' defense is not very good against receivers. They have a lot of young cornerbacks and young players on defense, and they struggled against the Seahawks. However, their offense bailed them out. Like we said, the Seahawks defense also struggled. Offensively for the Lions, they looked fantastic all around. They ran the ball at will. David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs both have great games. Both score touchdowns. They throw at will. Jameson Williams catches a long touchdown. Amon-Ra ends up getting into the end zone. Sam Laporta even has a decent-looking game. Jared Goff did not even throw an incompletion the entire time. The offensive line's fantastic. Lions looked great, and they are going to be great all season, and they're a great team overall. They're going to be a playoff team with ease. So, very fun team. Love their coach. I hope they win the Super Bowl this year. Like, Lions, I would be totally fine with the Lions winning the Super Bowl this year. Would much rather see the Lions win over a team like the Kansas City Chiefs. So, shout out the Lions, good win. Seahawks, while they their defense got exposed, they're still also a good team. Might be an exciting matchup come the playoffs. Who knows? The Lions could play the Seahawks again. I would be down with that. Still a long ways away. We'll see what happens. But that is going to be it for this one, guys. Fun video. It's probably going to be a little longer, especially with me not posting start-sit video last week. I wanted to kind of go a little bit in depth in this one. I may not get a start-sit video out this week. Already a warning. Like I said at the beginning of the video, guys, if I didn't cover what you want to hear in this one as far as fantasy questions goes, just comment on my most recent video. You could technically comment on any video, and I'll get the notification. I'll get back to you very quickly. But other than that, please feel free to like the video if you enjoyed it at all, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see any more throughout the season. Peace out for Week 4 reaction. See you guys in the next one. Have a good one.